Hello and welcome to Calvary Burlington. It's our hope that through today's message you will encounter the love of Jesus, that Calvary would be a church where people can be engaged in community, evangelized through solid biblical teaching, respond to the gospel and be established in the faith, and then be equipped to help others take a step to the right towards spiritual maturity. It's our prayer that in everything we do, we are living out our calling to be disciples who make disciples. Learn more online at calvaryburlington.ca. Now let's hear today's message.
Well, we had a chance just a couple weeks ago to spend 10 days in Uganda as we were there. And we wanted just to take this time to update you of what God is doing there in light of the fact that by God's grace, we're going to be going back and continuing our training in our church. And so we put some pictures together, and we wanted just to make sure that you heard and saw what we were up to. So Peter and I are going to go back and forth and hopefully not bore you to death with but we want you to be encouraged because we couldn't have done what we did without our church supporting us. And so in a very real sense, it was a missions trip. And just as we have missionaries give reports, we want to update you on what God is doing. First slide here gives you a little context into where we went. This is the country of Uganda. Uganda is for some of us who are maybe a little bit older, we remember Uganda in history past as being the country where Idi Amin was the president of. A lot of history in that country, a lot of stories that we even heard while we were over there of what life was like in the 70s with regards to how Idi Amin and his government controlled things there. But we had the chance to fly from Toronto directly to Addis Ababa and then down to this country called Uganda at an airport called Entebbe. And when we flew into Entebbe, we did not quite understand what to expect. It was a long flight, 13 hours in the air to Addis Ababa and then another hour down. And then we had to travel 100 kilometers from Entebbe to, as you see on the map there, a town called Jinja. And we thought, well, 100 kilometers, that's an hour, no problem. That was a 5.5 hour drive. Now, some of the roads were great.
On a highway.
On a highway.
Yeah.
But there's no words to express what 5.5 hours travel to Jinja felt like. We were exhausted. We were ready to get out of a car. But as we arrived, we were welcomed by Azarias, who was our driver. He gave us some great insight as to what Uganda was like. He is a pastor as well, and he drove us there. And it was just incredible, just for the very beginning, to start to see the country that we were visiting. Beautiful country, so many people, so much life. I mean, from the life of the people to the life of what you're going to see in some of these slides. But it was just preparing us. After a 5.5 hour drive, we arrived in Jinja. Jinja is the tourist place in Uganda. Funny enough, that's the place where people go for holidays. And it was a privilege to go there. We went to our hotel called the Brisk Hotel. And I guess you could describe the Brisk as a 1-star hotel from the 60s.
No.
It was clean.
Yeah.
It was just unique, and we were very thankful to get there. Our keys were skeleton keys,
Yeah.
and it was quite the place. It's on the shores of Lake Victoria, if you know your geography, and Jinja is famous because it's the headwaters of the Nile River, and we got to see the beginnings of the Nile River that was there. And so as we traveled to Jinja, we got there not knowing anybody except for myself and Peter, and we traveled with the senior pastor from Stony Creek Baptist Church in London. His name was Mark Farrow, and the three of us really had no idea what to expect. Mark had done a Leaders 4. Now, when we were there, our task was to work with pastors and to help disciple them. They use a curriculum, and we partnered with our fellowship of churches, of evangelical Baptist churches, to disciple pastors. They don't have the opportunities for theological education like we do because they have to work and they have families and they have crops. And so we can peel them away for 3 to 4 days and just do some intensive training, discipleship. And it was a privilege to have a couple of down days before we started our training. But we were in Jinja, and that was great. Now, surprise, surprise. Now, Peter, I think we kind of going back and forth. I have the first two slides, right? Right?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, actually,
Now
it's up to you. You're up to your slide now.
So I think we have to be thankful for what God has done over the centuries in Uganda, because there are Christians there are churches established, and we were dependent upon them. So the local leader that we were supposed to meet up with, he wasn't available, but his sister was. And that Friday night, Damali came over and took us out for dinner. We bought, but she started talking about this home that she runs for babies. So the next day, she picks us up again, a little later in the morning, and we go down to the market. I get my shirt and my letter opener.
Yep.
Yeah.
A 12-inch dagger.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Which my granddaughter now has.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. And she took us out to her home for babies after that. I'll describe her as this. She was abandoned by her husband, leaving her as a single mother of 3 girls. The youngest is a nonverbal autistic. Her hands are full. But God has opened up an incredible opportunity. June, can you show the slide? So we go out and we see this home. She is housing 50 children in 4 houses, which Grandview from our fellowship in Kitchener have built for them. She tries to have the children locally adopted in 3 years, at 3 years of age. She has a group of 80-year-old Floridian women who come on a trip just to hold children. So I don't care who you are. If you can sit in a chair, you got ministry, okay? These kids like attention, and you can see them crowding around us, just wanting to touch and be with us. She also has a small dairy of 7 cows, 3 of which are milk, and she needs this for disease-free milk for the babies. Because of AIDS, she can't get human milk. She needs to use the cows for that. So if you can go to the next slide. Slide 1 shows that each child has a shelf of their own for their clothes. That's it. 1 shelf, 3 piles, right? That's it. That's all they got. And if we go back and you want to help out, Crocs. Those kids love Crocs. So
The shoes.
Yes, the shoes.
Yes. They have crocodiles there.
Didn't see them.
Crocs, the shoes. Yes.
Slide 2, just showing that the kids are well cared for, generally happy, very friendly. And then the third slide shows their bedroom situation. Little beds, but what's beside them? Do you see that? Everyone has a mosquito net, okay? So malaria is very, very prevalent down there. They catch it numerous times.
I'll go to the next slide. What you see here is the foundation for what Damali is trusting the Lord will provide for a hospital for these families, these babies. We weren't expecting to meet with Damali. It was kind of like those, like Peter said, the original guy we were supposed to meet with had family things he had to deal with, and so Damali, just out of the goodness of her heart, came and met us, and we didn't have any idea about this baby home, but it kind of blew us away. I don't think we were prepared emotionally to see all of these children and the needs that are there. She'll have babies literally just dropped off at the doorstep, at the gate. She will receive a phone call from a hospital saying, there's a baby here, we don't want it, would you come and take it? And so in the middle of the night, she'll drive to this hospital and take this baby. And some of these babies are very sick. When we were there, she had 2 babies in the local hospital. And we prayed with her that God would provide the funds for her to actually get those babies treated. Like, that's how the health system works, right? If you don't pay, you don't get treated. And so as 2 guys sitting there, it kind of stopped us pretty cold. And Damali said, if you can just send people over to hold these babies and to love them because they're craving love, it hit us pretty hard. And this hospital here, Damali is, like, she's an amazing woman that God has given a vision for and connections even back in North America. And they prayed that they would get this land so they could build this hospital so that she could have the right doctors come so that they would have a place for babies to come and receive treatment. And she wouldn't have to go through all the rigmaroles with the hospitals in that area. The land here was basically owned by a local person who had connections with the witch doctor, and the witch doctor had basically told him, you can't have this land. And Damali said, you watch what my God does. And they prayed, and they were able to buy this land. And the witch doctor was silenced, and the person who sold them the land, I think if I remember the story right, actually gave his life to Christ because he saw what God did in providing the funds to buy that land. Like, that's how on the edge of spiritual warfare things were. So it was a privilege. We saw the foundation, and we prayed with Damali and prayed for her that God would provide the rest of the funds and what's necessary for this baby home. Again, we went there to disciple pastors. We didn't go to hold babies. But to see Grandpa Peter holding babies was kind of moving. You saw the picture there, and it really hit us pretty hard. And we would ask that you pray for Damali. The name of the baby home is Sunrise Baby Home. You can Google it and look it up. And we're hoping that Damali will be in North America in the next little while. We'd like to invite her to Calvary just to meet you folks. And maybe we don't know what God's doing here. We don't know why that divine opportunity happened for us to meet Damali happened, but we were so thankful for what God is doing here. Well, we're going to go into the next slide here, and that was our first church service in Uganda. And Peter, we're going to pass it over to you.
Peter, you're pretty quiet.
Peter Bruin.
Yeah, when my watch hits 90 dB, right? It's noisy. And that's the church service. You see my watch? 90. Oh, tell you. So it's not a quiet place. It's not a non-energetic place. As I talked to many of the pastors, the average church would have an attendance of about 100 people. It's about 25 adults, 25 young people, and about 50 children. We surveyed our leaders and also discovered that everyone, I don't think there's an exception, everyone became a Christian in their late teens or later. Most were in their 20s when they came to Christ, which is contrary to what your experience probably was, but that's the way it is. At the end of this, their worship band was incredible in terms of harmonizing, and I did something I shouldn't have done, but
Peter went up to the worship team after and said, "Could you just do some more songs?" And so they did. We just kept the worship going, and it was just a privilege to be part of that. Pastor Mark spoke that morning, and it was very challenging, but it was just, church, when we worship, we forget sometimes that we are part of a church worldwide, right? And as we worshiped with that church that morning at Sunrise Community Church, it was just a privilege to be there and be part. I mean, it was a tent. They are. If you look at the beginning of that, sorry, I'm kind of jumping, Peter. Do you have anything else you wanted to say?
Well, the thing is, when they start a church, all they need is a tree. They don't need hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's just, let's get under a tree and let's start doing it.
That's right. Many of our pastors talked about that. They just met under a tree until the Lord provided something else for them. But this church was looking to build a building and plant a building in this location, and that was just a real privilege. So it was awesome. It was great to kind of get warmed up to what God is doing in the country of Uganda. Our next slide here. Now we're into Jinja. And in the hotel, we had invited 20 pastors from all over Uganda to come and join us. This is part of a cohort that's been meeting. They'd already met twice before. But they come to Jinja for 4 days on their holidays. This was their Christmas break. And the pastors cannot leave for long periods of time. One, because they have to provide for their families. But two, there was a problem that if you leave your church for too long, someone might take over your church as another pastor, which it caught us off guard. Like, I was gone for 10 days. I'm like, well, Dave Whelan's got the church now, I didn't have to worry about that. But for them, that was something because as we were seeking to raise up churches, people would come in and want to take over a congregation. And there was the potential for like wolves and sheep to come and to distract the church and to take it off its foundations. And so they could only come for 4 days. They loved coming. Where we were, we just spoiled them. Meals were provided for them. The hotel room where they stayed, by North American standards, it was all right. Depending on what you, like, I mean, yeah, it was all right. But anyway,
3 days without hot water.
well, what you need hot water for, We all learned a lot of stuff. Our mantra was, it's not wrong, it's just different, right? So, but they loved it. They loved coming together, the fellowship. They loved just praying together, worshiping together, studying the scriptures together. We used this curriculum, and this was the book that, if you were part of our trial preparation, Cultivating Habits of the Heart. For 4 days, we were focusing on what habits does God want to produce in your life that will lead you to continue to grow. And so over the course of those 4 days, walking through this curriculum, it was a very much soteric method of teaching, in that it was very much discussion and questions. And it was exciting to be part of that. And so as we led that one, we were able to just use this curriculum, and it was really cool that way. So go to the next slide. Peter's going to talk a little bit about.
So the Brisk Hotel Conference Room, you can see it set up there. We had the instructors again were Pastor Aaron, Pastor Mark from Stony Creek, and then Cedric. He came in from Kenya, and it is good to have a local so that he can talk to them about their circumstances and use local illustrations and whatnot. And then there was Senior Pastor Peter.
Yes. When we got there, because Peter is a little bit older than me, they thought he was in charge, which was great, guys, because I could just step back and let Senior Pastor deal with everything, right? And so that was great. You can see Cedric's on the bottom picture here. But this is how it was set up. We just sat around tables and opened the Word together and discussed. But Cedric was very good at helping us to take these habits and to translate them into a cultural expression that made sense for them. And so we could not have done what we did unless we'd partnered with Cedric. I mean, he was just outstanding and so helpful.
So this is the large group training, and the instructors, we brought over various things. I didn't bring out that much, but man, some people, they brought over honey candies, and maple syrup candies, and even butter tarts, Canadian flag pins, notebooks, and pens. And every morning we would start off with a devotional that we would put on and lead them in the Word. And we didn't put it up, but I sent it. I don't know what Candy did with the videos. I sent up these men singing, and the harmonization of a cappella man over there. It's not. It is sweet. It is really sweet to listen to them sing.
It was pretty powerful. And so you're starting to see a little bit of what it looked like. Going into the next slide, this shows what our small group discussions looked like. Not only would we work through a curriculum, but part of our task was to help these pastors to grow in some of the skills that they need in pastoral ministry. And one of those things was biblical exposition. Again, some have a little bit of theological training, but many don't have access to it because of the cost. And so for many, this was like they were just drinking this all up. This was just so good. We would split up into small groups, work with them. They would work together, and then we would come together, and you can see us there leading in discussions. We'd all come around an easel board with paper, and we would laugh, we would cry, we would celebrate, we would worship as we started to see these habits kind of fleshing out in their life. We are not experts at this, but we just saw God's Spirit just use these times to encourage the church. And we heard many stories of what God is up to in these discussions in the lives of our Ugandan pastors. And that was amazing. One thing I should add, all of these pastors, none of them are full-time. They have jobs that have to provide for their families and for their educations of their kids, because they got to pay to go to school. And they're also full-time farmers. If they don't grow it, they don't get to eat it. So can you imagine you're farming for your family, and these are big families. They all have 6, 8 kids. And and they're also working to raise a little bit of money, and then they pastor on top of this. And the needs are huge. We said, well, do you take an offering? And they said, well, we do take an offering, but seldom are we able to get out of the church with any of the offering because the needs are so great for people. Can you imagine collecting our offering on a Sunday morning and the pastor is rushed with so many needs that he has to dip into the offering and just to try to provide for the church family and for the needs of the community. So he doesn't take rarely will they be able to take a payment out of the offering to help them with their family. And so just hearing of this was so important for our theological discussions and our discipleship discussions. Going on to the next slide, Peter.
So this is a young man that I grew to love. You'll see him in the middle there doing his, he was forced by Cedric to come up. This is the youngest person, so therefore he defers to who? Anybody else. Anybody else is older than him, so he defers to them. And he's silent. He also has not completed high school. He is a young youth pastor. He's very quiet, unsure himself, stands in the back. You can see him standing in the back in the third picture over. But Cedric asked him to come up and be his group spokesperson for his findings, and he did well. He also had the courage to approach me. I don't have a Bible anymore. He had an incident where his knapsack was stolen, which included his phone and his Bible, and he asked me if I could give him his Bible, and I gave him my Bible.
Yeah, I think church, Ivan really impacted Peter. There was a bond between Ivan wanted to get married, and in order to get married, you have the dowry system over there, and so he was a young guy, and he didn't have the money in order to provide the dowry, and so Peter would pray with him and talk with him, and Ivan is just a young pastor. He would be called a youth pastor. He worked in Kampala and just serving the youth, and there he is getting trained. And we just wanted you to pray for Ivan. That's the next generation of pastors coming up, and it's very encouraging to see what God is doing in their life as well. So pray for Ivan as well. Our next slide there. This is Pastor Mark, who we were with as well. But I wanted to show this picture because on the screen here, you'll see this is Francis in the middle. Church, we need our church to pray for these pastors. And what we've done is after the service at the back, we've made bookmarks with each of the pastors. There's 2 on each bookmark. You can take as many as you want. We want to get rid of them. We are inviting you as a church to join us in praying for these pastors. There's a QR code on each of the bookmarks that's linked to a video that we made with the pastors in which they talked about some of the requests that they have, and you can meet some of these pastors. This is Francis. Francis was just another young pastor, loving Jesus, loving the church, has a keen mind and a keen heart to serve Jesus, and we want us as a church at Calvary to be praying for these pastors, and you will be encouraged as you watch some of the videos. So after the service, they're all over the back. Just grab one. You won't know them, but you'll meet them on the video, and just pray for them by name. And by God's grace, over the course of the next time we go, maybe we'll hear some updates of these pastors, and it will be a privilege for us to be praying for them as well. All right, next slide. That's just a group photo of all of us. We were missing one pastor, and this one hit us pretty hard. As we were going around looking and taking attendance, we were told, you remember, was it Robert? Robert.
Yeah.
Robert couldn't be at the training because he was attacked in his village and beaten so badly that he couldn't basically get there. He was beaten because he was a pastor, and he was robbed, and he was at the last cohort meeting, and he couldn't be at this one, and so we were -1. We gained a couple others along the way, but this is the group of guys that we got to spend these days with, and they made a huge impact on us, and it impacted us that one of them couldn't be there because he was beaten for his faith in that country. And that hit us pretty hard on that one as well. Next slide.
So this is the Medigo compound. Just
To explain a little bit what we did then after, how we got there, who the Medicos are.
okay. So another 5-hour road trip back to, And then we it was a little bit longer, a Kenyan flight. We left Mark at the airport, and we flew into, and what's it,
Nairobi.
Nairobi.
Yeah.
And it ended up at night. We met I think it's actually a nephew, but they call him grandson of Lois's, who came to pick us up, and he drove us home. I don't have time. There's so many stories to tell you. So he drove us here. You'll see in a few slides the road that we took up to the house. Notice the water storage tanks, and on the roof, the photovoltaic cells. And on the left-hand side, there's a lush garden. They love their garden. You know, kale, what's that? Kale, and all these other
All the vegetables you love.
Oh yes, yes.
Peter went to a country that's full of vegetables, and how much do you like vegetables?
Oh, I won't go into my theology.
Yeah. It was good. The Mendigos, Apollo and Lois, are our missionaries that we support here at Calvary. Because we were so close, we wanted to go and visit them. You can go to the next slide, June. And they right now, because of Apollo's stroke, as he's recovering from that, their home base is in Kajabi, Kenya, and we wanted to visit with them and just to see how they're doing. You can see Apollo. That was the first night that we met at their house and finally went up to their place, and it was just a privilege. We preached in their home church, and that was a privilege. We don't understand, I don't think we fully understand how connected Lois is. Lois's dad was a pastor, and a pastor in that area. And so everybody knows Lois, and she's related to everybody up there. So this was a good spot. This is a good place for them to be. They know a lot of family, and they are able to kind of minister and care for people. While we were there, you know that if you were watching the news, the hostilities in the country that they usually leave from Kenya to go and serve in Goma, Congo, things are rising. And so the tensions were getting higher, and you kind of knew some stuff was going on here. As we prayed together, we knew that Goma was changing. And so be praying for the Mendigos here. That's me praying with an interpreter, preaching with an interpreter at the church. That was fantastic. A privilege to be part of that. Again, it was loud.
2 hours.
2 hours.
And half an hour for you.
Yep, and I preached for half an hour. Yeah. Usually the preaching goes for about an hour. So I cut it back a little bit.
Oh, a lot.
Yeah, but it was good. And it's just a great to be part of that. So please be praying for Apollo and Lois. They are, like I said, our missionaries that we support over there, and it was a privilege to be in their home and to minister with them.
So the next slide shows the Victoria Nile behind the baby home. Quick poem. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree. And it's lush over there. There's a country there. It's beautiful. The next slide is you're gonna have to remind me the name of it. This is the valley
The Rift Valley.
The Rift Valley
Yeah,
that the Mendigos look down on. Again, it's lush. It's beautiful. Everything grows there. It's incredible. And so often, while with the Mendigos, our conversations would go to the creativity of God as we looked at. They took us out, and we went to a resort, and we saw giraffes and zebras. Nothing real wild, but we were just dumbfounded by what God was doing. If we can go to the next slide. Guess what, guys? Nothing's changed. You go around the world, and it's the same verse. It's bilingual there, but it's the same verse. It's the same mission, and they got it, and so do we.
I'm sorry. I think we'll end it there. A few more pictures along the way, but that really captured the essence of what God was doing. By God's grace, we hope to return in a year or so. We're not sure exactly who's going, but we as a church have partnered for 5 years to help disciple these pastors. So we are really calling our church to participate in this. This isn't just a pet project for myself or for Peter. We actually believe that part of discipleship, not only in the local church, but happens cross-culturally. And we are asking us all to be praying for these pastors, their wives, their families. They face a lot to serve Jesus. And they believe that one of the greatest things that they can do is plant more churches. They are just about planting churches, because the more churches that they have, the more people can hear about Jesus, And the more people that hear about Jesus, the less people we hear from false religions and false teaching. And so it was just part of, it changed us. It filled our cups, filled our bucket with what God's doing here. And we are so privileged. And so we want to say thank you to you as a church. It was because of your generosity that we are able to participate in this. And we would just covet your prayers as we move forward in this. Father, thank you for the country of Uganda and what you're doing there. And we thank you for the opportunities you gave Peter and I to be representatives from this church to go and serve their pastors. We pray for their pastors. The needs are great. And we ask, Lord, that you would provide and work, and that, God, you would build your church as you are doing. Thank you for their courage. Thank you for their dedication. Thank you for their commitment to biblical truth. Thank you for their commitment to living holy lives, and that they are committed to pointing people to Jesus and helping people to understand the reality of a relationship with your Creator, through Jesus Christ. So we pray that you would bless this church, protect it, watch over it, and would you multiply it greatly. And we thank you for this time that we can spend